We're tracing over the final decline of Israel under their kings, even as the Babylonians invade Jerusalem, destroying everything, including the temple. They take the best of the people, the royal family, the educated, the wealthy, the priests and teachers of the law, and they make them slaves in Babylon, exiles with no home to go to. At the end of the books of the kings, after a few brief years of optimism and obedience under King Josiah, we now see the whole thing unravel very quickly. Josiah was killed in battle when he marched out to attack the Egyptians who were going to support the Assyrians. Josiah's son succeeded him, but lasted only 3 months before Pharaoh Necho, who had killed Josiah, put another one of Josiah's sons on the throne as his puppet governor. He became known as Jehoiakim, and he paid heavy taxes and tribute to the Egyptians. But then Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, subjugated Egypt and he invaded Israel. And so for 3 years, all the taxes and tributes then went to him. Well, here's what happened next, as recorded in 2 Kings chapter 24. But then Jehoiakim turned against Nebuchadnezzar and rebelled. The Lord sent Babylon, Aramean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against him to destroy Judah, and in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by his servants the prophets. Surely these things happened to Judah according to the Lord's command, in order to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all he had done, including the shedding of innocent blood. For Manasseh had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was not willing to forgive. This rebellion led to a siege of Jerusalem that lasted for 2 years. The people were starved and weakened. The city wall was eventually breached, and the Babylonians destroyed the temple and many other buildings. The people of Judah were taken into exile in Babylon, where they would remain for the next several decades. Sometime during this period, Jehoiakim died, and his 18-year-old son, Jehoiachin, became king. He lasted only 3 months before he fully surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar. He and his family were taken prisoner along with others, and so began the period known as the Exile. God's people were removed from their land, dispossessed, and only a shadow of their former selves. It appeared that God had abandoned his people. And so we read, in the 8th year of the reign of the king of Babylon, he took Jehoiachin prisoner, as the Lord had declared. Nebuchadnezzar removed the treasures from the temple of the Lord and from the royal palace, and cut up the gold articles that Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the temple of the Lord. He carried all Jerusalem into exile, all the officers and fighting men, all the skilled workers and artisans, a total of 10,000. Only the poorest people of the land were left. Nebuchadnezzar took Jehoiachin captive to Babylon. He also took from Jerusalem to Babylon the king's mother, his wives, his officials, and the prominent people of the land. The king of Babylon also deported to Babylon the entire force of 7,000 fighting men, strong and fit for war, and 1,000 skilled workers and artisans. He made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place and changed his name to Zedekiah. So nearing the end of 2 Kings, there's this small group of Jews left in Jerusalem, a city besieged and destroyed, the temple defiled and not functioning. Zedekiah is in charge, and he's supposed to pay homage and taxes to Nebuchadnezzar. Can you imagine how grim life would have been? 9 years pass before Zedekiah tries to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar. And so reading on from 2 Kings chapter 25. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward the Arabah. But the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. On the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, an official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city. So it's all pretty gruesome stuff here, and it's horrible. And it's well-attested history. Archaeological evidence in Jerusalem, Lachish, and other Judean cities reveal burn layers, collapsed walls, and destruction debris dated to the early 6th century BC. King Nebuchadnezzar also kept very good records of his exploits. Cuneiform tablets, known as the Babylonian Chronicles, date the siege to 597 BC and confirm many of the details that we've got recorded in the Bible. But bare history doesn't give us the interpretation, the meaning of these events. 2 Kings, however, keeps reminding its readers that it's all God's judgment against his people for the generations of disobedience and the rejection of their covenant with God. God was allowing all this to happen. To be clear, he purposed all this as judgment on his own people. He'd sent prophets with many warnings so many times, but now judgment was being carried out. The only glimmer of hope seemed to come at the very end of 2 Kings, 37 years after Jehoiachin was taken prisoner to Babylon. After Nebuchadnezzar died, his successor released Jehoiachin from jail, took off his prison clothes, and seated him among his guests at the royal table. He enjoyed some kind of freedom so long as he stayed in Babylon. We don't know exactly why this happened, but the ending of the account of Israel's kings effectively leaves open the continuity of the royal line of David. There's a thread of promise that remains, but that's all. And we're left to ponder the judgment visited upon the people of Israel for the failure of their kings, priests, and leaders to be faithful to God. Of course, the people were also unfaithful. They also experienced the consequences of their own sin. So what's going on? We see an expression of the faithfulness of God to his promises. Even in the midst of judgment and exile, God remains true to his word and even raised up prophets like Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Micah to speak his word to the people. They could at least learn why this had happened. In time, the prophets brought words of comfort in their distress. God promised that he would not utterly abandon them. Promises came that one day God would restore them to their land and to a new covenant and with a new heart. As the people of God lived as an oppressed minority in the midst of a foreign people, far from their promised land, the spirituality of the exile developed. This is a way of seeing God in relation to his people that fits so well with the Christian experience today, a theme that's picked up by several New Testament writers, and so it's worth our consideration here. What might we learn? We see if straight away God is not merely a national God of Israel, confined to a particular land, limited to a temple, apparently defeated when the Jews are overthrown. Yes, the people of Israel do have a particular role to play in God's plans, but his plans and his rule are for all people, all nations. He's king over all kings and every nation. He is Lord of all creation. Even in a horrible exile, we're going to see this God at work, fulfilling his purposes for salvation. Scripture includes several angles and perspectives on this time of exile, and it's rich with insight and promise, and so helpful for our formation as Christian people. Our character, our outlook, and our expectations as followers of Jesus Christ are therefore enriched even as we dwell upon this most difficult of times in Israel's history. I'm Stuart Holman. It's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow as we